What's up, newsers? It's the Russian dude. There are moments when even seasoned observers of this war are forced to stop, reread, and recalibrate their sense of reality. Not because something unexpected happened on the battlefield, but because something deeply rotten happened along the front lines. The most recent investigation published by Russian opposition media Verstka does exactly that. It documents a practice known inside the Russian army as zeroing out, and nullifying, most commonly known for you guys as well. A euphemism that hides something far more disturbing than its bureaucratic tone suggests. This is not about isolated excesses or a few bad actors losing control. This is about a system where soldiers are exploited, abused, and quietly erased by their own commanders, while families beg for justice and receive nothing but silence in return. And the most unsettling part is not that this happens, it's that the state sees it, understands it, and deliberately allows it to continue to happen. So today, we're going to unpack why these crimes go unpunished, how they became normalized, who benefits from them, and why, from the Kremlin's perspective, this horror is not a failure of the system, but one of its most useful tools. Yes, we did speak about the concept of nullifying in the previous videos, but today, guys, I want to go more broader concept and talk also about the reaction of the people, specifically the families of these soldiers, because this is very devastating for the future of the Russian military. When people think about war, they usually imagine danger coming from the opposite side. Artillery, missiles, drones, trenches, explosions. But Verstka's investigation forces us to confront a much darker reality what is happening in Russia. For many Russian soldiers, the most immediate threat, believe it or not, does not come from the Ukrainian fire. It comes from their own chain of command. The testimonies collected describe a pattern of abuse that is so systematic, repetitive, and openly tolerated. Soldiers are beaten for refusing zero chance of success assault orders. They are extorted for money that was promised to them by the state. They are punished not through formal military discipline, but through underground violence that leaves no paperwork behind, and as you would expect it, for a reason. And families know what happened to their sons and husbands. They file complaints, they write appeals, they record video messages addressed to anyone who might listen. And nothing happens. Investigations stall, cases disappear, prosecutors look the other way. From the outside, this looks irrational. I mean, these practices damage morale, they scare off potential recruits, they drive people to flee the army altogether and avoid it like a black plague. Why would any government allow its armed forces to rot from within like this? The answer becomes clearer once you understand what the Russian military is actually being used for in this war. It is not a professional fighting force pursuing clear strategic objectives. It's just a human conveyor belt designed to push bodies forward, regardless of the cost. Officers are not rewarded for preserving their personnel. They are rewarded for sending people into assaults that move the front lines by a few meters every day. If that requires intimidation, beatings, and outright elimination of those who refuse, so be it. The system quietly approves. Punishing these commanders would also introduce hesitation. It would force officers to consider legal consequences before issuing these impossible orders. And hesitation in this type of warfare is considered far more dangerous than the cruelty. That realization leads us directly to the next layer of the system and how privilege is distributed within it, which is what we're going to talk about in our next chapter. In Putin's Russia, loyalty to the system comes with privileges. For years, this logic applied primarily to Siloviki faction, security services, intelligence agencies, and law enforcement elites. They were allowed almost everything in how they operated, as long as they protected the regime and delivered the needed results for the Kremlin. Internal discipline existed, but public accountability did not. The war extended this logic downward into military hierarchy. Junior and senior officers alike were granted a similar form of immunity, not written in the law obviously, but enforced through practice. But this immunity eventually has a price tag. Officers are allowed to enrich themselves off their own soldiers. They cut themselves a portion of their salaries. I mean, that's the very basic way of how they do it. They also steal compensation payments meant for injuries. They run supply scams chains. They extort families desperate for information or protection and then just give nothing in return. In exchange, they keep the machinery running. They make sure that assault units keep moving forward instead of collapsing from fear or refusal. From the Kremlin's perspective, this is a transaction. An officer who steals money but delivers bodies to the front line is more valuable than a clean, reputable and high moral officer who hesitates. Corruption is not a side effect here, it's an incentive mechanism. Strip commanders of the ability to profit, and suddenly the job becomes much less attractive. Why risk your life, your future and eventual prosecution for a salary alone, which is 100,000 rubles? Why do this when corruption is what makes the position worthwhile? This is why complaints are dangerous. A single high-profile conviction could ripple through the ranks. If one commander is punished for extortion or abuse, others will start calculating risk and thinking twice. Orders will be questioned, assaults will stall, and this kind of war cannot tolerate questioning. It depends on fear flowing downward and protection flowing upward. But this arrangement, as expected, has consequences. Stories do leak out, soldiers talk to families, videos circulate in private chats. The reputation of the army among potential recruits begins to collapse. Which brings us to a critical contradiction the Kremlin is now struggling to manage. Before I continue, guys, please make sure to check our Patreon. Each video contains an additional chapter at the end, plus this is once again the best way to support our work here on YouTube. The links are down below in the description, in the pinned comment. Thanks so much, now let's continue. On paper, the recruitment offer looks irresistible. Millions of rubles upfront, monthly pay that makes original salaries look like an unsuccessful side hustle, debt forgiveness, basically a chance to reset a life buried under loans and dead-end jobs. For someone in a struggling town, this can look like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and escape. But reality has a way of erasing propaganda, and reality travels fast through personal networks. In small towns, for example, everyone knows everyone. When one man signs a contract, the entire town watches what happens next. They hear about the conditions, they see the messages sent home, they notice when someone stops responding altogether. Unlike polished TV segments, these stories carry weight because they come from friends, neighbors, relatives and classmates, not just some random person you never ever met in your life. And the most interesting part, I guess if you can call it interesting, is that fear of internal violence now rivals fear of the battlefield itself. People are not only worried about the enemy fire, they are worried about being beaten in basements, extorted by commanders, or punished for refusing an order that guarantees they will not come back. For many, this fear outweighs even the lure of massive bonuses. The government is aware of this. Recruitment numbers suffer, desertion rises, media zone estimates tens of thousands of desertion-related cases, and that's only counting those who were caught. So just imagine how many more just simply vanished. That represents tens of billions of rubles paid out with nothing to show in return. Logically, this would be the moment to publicly discipline abusive officers, clean up the system, restore some trust, but instead the opposite happens. The violence intensifies. Why? Because the Kremlin understands something brutally simple. There is no shortage of poverty. There will always be another wave of desperate men pushed towards enlistment by debt, addiction, or social pressure. And as long as the wider public remains indifferent, which unfortunately they are, these atrocities remain politically harmless, because it just happened somewhere, to somebody else. Which raises now a deeper question. How did the Russian army arrive at this point in the first place? To answer that, we need to look at the origins of this whole culture. The Russian military has never been gentle, let's be real. Use of force, abuse and humiliation existed long before this war. But regular, normalized executions within units themselves are something new. They did not appear overnight. They were imported, cultivated and rewarded. The first source came from the so-called breakaway regions in eastern Ukraine. For years, these territories functioned as lawless zones that attracted criminals, fugitives and opportunists. Many of the men who rose to the command there had absolutely no formal military education. What they did have, however, was experience operating in environments where violence had absolutely no consequences. Torture chambers, physical punishments were already part of their own toolkit long before the full-scale invasion. Then came the influx of convicts. By now, Russian prisons has almost absolutely emptied of anyone physically capable of holding a weapon. Young offenders, career criminals, men who spent decades in penal colonies where brutality was just routine, daily routine. That culture did not disappear when they were just put on uniforms. It only spread fast. Finally, there was also Wagner. Yevgeny Prigozhin did not invent cruelty, but he turned it into a brand. He openly glorified internal executions as a method of discipline. He made brutality synonymous with effectiveness. And while Wagner is gone now, its methods live on. Drone surveillance of assault groups, disposable units, fear as motivation, all of it migrated into a regular army. Put these elements together and you get a force that cannot function without terror. Civilians turned soldiers do not obey self-destructive orders voluntarily. They obey because refusal carries immediate consequences. 10% chance of survival is better than no chance at all. And remove that fear, and the entire structure risks collapsing. This is why there is no alternative path forward for the Kremlin. Punishing abusive officers would expose the emptiness of the war's goals. Because, there is obviously no clear objective to motivate the sacrifice. Why are we fighting? Ask these Russian soldiers, and none of them will be able to tell you this. No vision strong enough to basically replace the fear, and, just like this system doubles down on what works, however grotesque it may be. The horrors documented by Versk are not random one-time cases. They are the mechanism that keeps this war going. That is the bleak truth. And it is a truth anyone tempted by quick money needs to understand before signing anything. Guys, if you want deeper daily breakdowns like this and an honest look at how the system actually works, please make sure to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget about our Patreon if you want to support our work, the links down below. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow.
To sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.